Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
It's political season again in our community, and a lot of conversation has been had about politics lately. We love to have political roundtable discussions here at Fronteras. We always try to bring lively topics, lively debates, a lot of questions about a lot of contentious races, some even political scandals going on in our own community. We're going to try to explore that here on Fronteras in the next couple shows. One of the most contended races in the El Paso community has been, and also in the news, has been House District 75, Texas House District 75. Of course, a lot of people wondering what's going to happen after Texas State Representative Chente Quintanilla, who has for a very long time held that position, decided to actually step aside and go into the county commissioner's race. He is actually now running for county commissioner precinct 3, and a lot of people talking, well, who is actually going to be the next state representative? There's been a lot of candidates. Candidates have jumped in, jumped out. A lot of people have said, well, this is one of the most interesting races because a lot of new faces. There is a presumed frontrunner now for House District 75, already christened by some staff members of the El Paso Times and also staff in other news networks, including the local political blogosphere. So today we have that particular frontrunner for House District 75 joining us, a very good friend of mine, State Representative candidate Mary Gonzalez, joining us here at Fronteras. Mary, instead of me going over your story, I'd like for people to hear it from you. Tell me a little bit more about yourself, where you grew up, what you've been doing, and more importantly, why are you running for District 75?
Thank you, Hector, for allowing me to be here today. I grew up in Clinton, Texas, which is a little bit outside of El Paso, part of the agricultural community in El Paso County. And I am a proud graduate of Clinton High School. Oldest of 11 siblings, and have great parents who've been really supportive of me. And, you know, I graduated from high school, went away to UT Austin to get degrees in history and Mexican American studies, my master's in social justice, and I'm working on a PhD in education from UT Austin. I grew up on a farm, and so when you grow up on a farm, you're a hard worker, and I worked full-time while going to school full-time, and so I've been really fortunate to work at the Capitol for 3 legislative sessions, worked at the National Hispanic Institute,
where we know each other
where
from.
That's how we met, and then went on and worked at UT Austin and then Southwestern University as an assistant dean and an instructor there very recently. So I left all that and left the classroom and put my PhD on a pause for a second, because this seat is really critical. It's really crucial. In the Texas House, open seats only come around once in a blue moon, and I think that we as a community need to make sure that we find the strongest legislator, the one who's the most qualified to make a difference. HD 75 is really unique. It has a strong agricultural rural community, but then it also has the fast growth areas of the far east El Paso, and so you have to be able to understand the city and the country in order to adequately represent a district like HD 75. And so kind of the background as an educator, as someone who worked in policy and understands city dynamics and issues in the country, I felt that I was, you know, really set up to do something like this.
Now, let's clear up for audience before we jump in a little more into the discussion. Tell me a little bit about the community. Where, if people want to conceptualize what the district looks like, where is it? Especially now with all the redistricting stuff going on. Sure.
With the new lines, or with the lines that were, you know, finalized, if you're in El Paso, Zaragoza to Tornillo. And it's basically a giant triangle, and so you're getting, again, the far east side of El Paso, the new growth areas. Someone told me the other day, you know it's fast growing because you have a super target, and super target goes into places where you know you're going to have a lot of population boom. And then you have the valley, Tornillo, Fabens, Clint, Sanelli, you have Horizon, you have East Montana. It's a very, very diverse district. It's beautiful with the missions and just a beautiful district.
Now, I'm going to jump into this. I'm going to jump into this head on, and a lot of people, that watch our programming here on PBS like to watch because of the political roundtable. In my particular format, I tend to be a little more opinionated, and I'm going to try to draw you in a little bit with that, just because I've been observing politics in El Paso for quite some time. I'm a lifelong El Pasoan myself. It frustrates me to see some of the things that I've seen. You and I have had conversations off air about some of the disappointments that we have had with a lot of the scandals that our community is currently facing. But there also seems to be new blood coming in. I mean, there's candidates like yourself. There's other candidates like Vincent Perez. There's candidates that are young, that have succeeded already, that are trying to make their way back in, like a Joe Moody. There is this group of individuals that is actively trying to begin to turn the tide. Give me your impression as to some of these things that have been going on in our community. Your thoughts about it. And in particular, a lot of it has to do with the area that you're representing. I mean, a recent scandal going on there with some arrests of a county commissioner, Willie Gandara. A lot of things going on, negative stuff. Does it bother you? I mean, it bothers me.
It bothers me because it continues to reinforce the impression that politicians are corrupt. And so when I talk to my siblings about running for office, they're like, "Oh, Mary, politicians are crooks." And as someone who's an educator, someone who really values young people, I want to be able to show that not all politicians are bad, that there's people out there running for political office who truly just care and want to make a difference. And so the new blood, like, a Joe Moody or myself, for example, we do provide the opportunity to say, like, there are people who sincerely care about the community, who are willing to put the community above themselves, who are willing to sacrifice and sincerely care and aren't corrupt. And I think that it's important that people like myself or Joe or Vince, etc., run to provide a breath of fresh air, a shining light. Just because, whether we like it or not, politics is always going to exist. Yeah. So we can either let politics be corrupt, or we can say, no, we're going to put a stop to it. We're going to define our destiny. We're going to pick people who we know care and value our community. Your district catches my attention a little bit. It's also part of the area where I personally have a lot of vested interest in. It is the single fastest growing area of the city. Mm-hmm. Our community is now largely becoming a fast rising Latino Hispano capital. When you look at your particulars of the community in terms of what it's received from the state of Texas over the course of time, kind of low in terms of the things that have been done in that area. I think I heard you on one of your speeches lately where you mentioned that the highest number of colonias are in your district. Yeah. Because of all the things that have been going on in the political landscape of El Paso, do you think your community has been taken advantage of? I mean, I think we've been ignored. I think especially if you think of Sanelli, right, which is like one of the oldest parts of the state, and it's barely getting some very necessary roads. And still, 49% of the people who live in Sanelli live below the federal poverty line. So when you think about things like that, I don't know if we've necessarily been taken advantage of, but we haven't been listened to. We haven't been given the necessary things that we need in order to continue to build as a community. We've just been thrown aside, just been ignored, and basic things. I have conversations with other legislators, and we talk about education policy, and we talk about these great and grand ideas. Right. And I have to pause sometimes and say, well, this is all very important. I still have to work on water, roads, street lines, just basic things that people need to live in a modern day society. And so I think it's why we need someone who's a fighter, who understands the process, and who understands how to get things done at the Capitol. Tell me a little bit more about the idea for your community in terms of your vision. I like to ask that question a lot because in prior occasions people have stumbled on that. You're talking about very basic things, water, being able to bring basic services out to folks. If you're able to succeed in some of those things, what do you think your vision for the community in terms of its future is, and how do you plan to work towards that? I think my vision primarily rests in young people. Definitely being a role model and showing and empowering young people to organize, to collect, to to be a part of a collective to make a difference. And so providing and while the vision may not seem grand, like, oh, I want to build a freeway or something, I have visions of making sure everyone has access to roads, to their schools, because they have a road now, making sure that we can do some economic development because we have water in certain areas, so people don't have to go 18 miles to get to the nearest grocery store, and so that the food there at the grocery store is healthy. And while these visions may not seem grand, these visions are probably extremely important, of basic infrastructure, of basic equal education systems, of making sure that our senior citizens are taken care of making sure that our people with disabilities are taken care of. And while these may not seem like grand visions, these are the necessary visions, and my job is to really listen to voters, and this is what they're telling me, that their vision is for their community, that their community is one that is healthy, that is supported, that is growing, and that is really making sure that it's a safe place for the next generation.
Let's talk about some of the realities also in achieving some of this vision, as well as some of the basic infrastructure that you're placing a lot of emphasis on. You've worked in Austin. Austin is a place where you have a large majority Republican representation, where a city that is traditionally Democratic is kind of in the minority. A lot of obstacles in terms of achieving a lot of these basic things, and in my own personal view, I would even say that's in many ways how our community has been taken advantage of, because they see it as someone that they could definitely walk through in terms of representation, because as Democrats, the Democratic representation is so small. In your view, what are some things that you can look to begin to do in terms of trying to navigate those waters?
Well, I think first is this session, last session we had a supermajority of the Republicans. This session we're actually looking to have such a supermajority, maybe even back in the 70s. And so hopefully if we can get the numbers back to equal out with Republicans and Democrats, then we might be able to get some things through. And I think the other thing is I have a natural ability to coalesce with even some Republicans, right? When it comes to the agricultural, more rural communities, well, that's part of my district too. And so there are opportunities to coalesce. And the third, I was really fortunate to call a mentor to some state representatives, and when I see the ones who are able to get things through, it's because they really work hard. They go and talk to all the representatives and say, this is why we need to do this. And create awareness, create coalitions, and then mobilize their local communities and make sure that they're fighting for the issues too. And so I think there's still, even though in a supermajority, there's still some ways to get things through.
It's interesting that we get to talk about strategies and what we would do if you were able to get there. But obviously there's still a long campaign. Have we decided how many days are left now between now and the time there's actually an election day? When is the election day?
The election date's May 29th.
Now tell me a little bit about some of the stuff going on here, because for a while it just seemed like it was never
ending.
To end. Like, were we ever going to
end.
have an election? That was a question I was actually asking people. Where are we with that? What was some of the battle behind that? Because I know a lot of people were kind of in the blue as to what was going on and what the district was going to say. I think it even led to the dropping out of one of the candidates from the race, didn't it? What happened there?
Well, that's a lot of questions in one second.
A lot of questions, yeah. Me just
I can tell you a little bit. Now that we have an election date, it does create some momentum, some excitement. I think people were getting worn out, like, okay, we're campaigning, not just myself as a candidate, but the voters. When is this going to happen? And so now it allows us to strategize more. It allows people who want to be involved in the process understand, okay, this is urgent, this is critical. And I think creating a sense of urgency around these elections is really important, because it's an important time to make sure that we get the right people in there. And so now, the date's May 29th. It's a difficult date because it's right before the summer break. It's, people are getting ready to go out of town, and so we really need to make sure that we're spreading the word about this is a day we all have to go out there and vote. This is a day, and we know it's been moved back from March and then from April, and now we're in June, but this is a day we have to really mobilize our communities, take our neighbors, our parents, our aunts and uncles, and as a campaign, while it did create more of a momentum and excitement, it never really changed much because we'd been working since day one. We've knocked on over 3,000 doors. We've been meeting with voters. We've been raising money. We've been gaining endorsements. And so we've just, you know, we've already had a lot of excitement. We really believe that this campaign can really support a community that really needs a fighter. And so we've been trying to use this campaign as a symbolic way to show how my candidacy, if I were elected, what I would be like as an elected official, someone who's going to fight the whole way. And as per the lines, we lost 8 precincts and gained 1 with the new lines, and so some people were moved in and out of that district.
Did you knock on some of those doors that are now outside of your?
We did knock on some of those doors, but only a few.
Yeah.
But either way, El Paso is like a big high school, and even if you live 2 blocks outside of the district, you know people in the district.
Each other,
yeah.
You're ending up. Yeah. Tell me, you're obviously talking a little bit about the block walking. You've done some of the commentary you've received from when you've been block walking, good and bad. You know, what are some of the biggest things that are coming up in terms of issues in your block walking?
Definitely public libraries. A lot of people that are outside of the city don't have access to public libraries, and they think that's really important for their children. Again, roads, infrastructure, education is a huge one. Everyone knows about the $4 billion cut to education last session, and kind of the critical situation we are in funding education for our next generation. Economic development. So a lot of different issues. I think one of the things I commonly hear is a thank you from people at the door. I've really worked hard to make sure this campaign stays as positive as possible, and people are really excited that there's someone that has excitement, has energy, who's qualified, who really is trying to change the way of politics, especially out there in the Valley.
How about the biggest critiques? Any critiques thus far along the way, either in the block walking or?
That I'm too cute and too young to be running for office.
Really? Too cute, too young? You know, you bring up young. I know some opponents have begun to use that as a critique. A lot of people have been saying,
no, not the too cute.
Not the too cute. Nah, not the too cute. The young part has been, but not the too cute. Yes. They use that, and you know what? It upsets me personally, because I think, wait a second, this is the exact kind of thing we want. We want young, educated, prepared, experienced individuals coming back to the community. What's the problem here? That's my own personal reaction to some of the commentary, but I'd like to allow some time for you to kind of respond to that. A lot of people talking about, well, why is Mary coming back from Austin all of this time? I mean, you studied in Austin, but give a little bit of response to the comment about young and the fact that they've said, well, you were living in Austin, you were being educated in Austin.
Well, I'm not as young as I look. I think the first thing, people assume that I'm a lot younger, but I'm 28 years old, which is the same age that, you know, Joe Moody or Joaquin Castro or, you know, Marisa Marquez came in at 29,
right.
Came into the political sphere. And so
right.
while I'm young, I'm not younger than anybody else who's kind of jumped into this and been successful.
Exactly.
And the second thing is yes, I'm from Clint. I grew up here. My whole family's from here, and I went away to school. And I was able to go away to school from the support of my parents, from the support of community scholarships through 4-H or through livestock shows. And so when a whole community comes and says, we want this young child to succeed, and we're going to help her and go away to college, and then I go away to college, and then I come back to use all these degrees to make a difference in my community, my home, to make sure that my family and my siblings have a legislator who cares about them, then it turns into a negative, right? Only in politics is going away to get an education viewed as a negative. Yeah. I mean, in other industries, other worlds, it would be like, wow, this woman cares about the community, went and got an education and then came back. And I think, you know, someone asked me early on in this campaign if I felt that my campaign was a symbolic. And I'm like, definitely. It's symbolic of something I've always told young people. Get educated, go to school, think critically, but then always come back and think about the community that helped you get to where you are. We tell young people all the time, go to school, get a job, and make money. But I think especially as an educator, I think we have to simultaneously tell young people, go to school, get a job, but always think about how you're going to give back to your community. And
Exactly.
I think that's the missing piece of what we're teaching young people. And so I hope that my actions are symbolic to young people about what is beyond getting a job. What can we do to really make a difference? And so this campaign is my way of walking the practicing what I preach.
Yeah, walking the walk.
Yeah, walking the walk. If I tell young people sometimes it's about sacrifice, then I'm going to sacrifice. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to put a pause on my PhD, and I'm going to run for a position that only pays about $7,000 a year, and sacrifice because I believe that's the right thing to do.
You know, let's talk a little bit about that. And I have to say, and I freely use my opinion on this television show on a regular basis, I couldn't agree with you more in terms of how you frame the example that we're setting for our youth. You and I know each other through the National Hispanic Institute. We talk about this on a regular basis with NHI alumni, active members of the organization. And one of the big things that we talk about is going above and beyond for your community. The story of sacrifice. I have heard you tell the story, and I'd love for you to be able to tell a little bit about it to all of our audience. The story of why you came back and what you left behind. You've left behind a pretty made life for yourself, you know, and the story of your family too, and the reasons why you're so close to your family, I think are important for our viewers to listen, if not only to kind of highlight the reasons why you're doing it, but also to kind of talk a little bit about that example for our youth. Tell me a little bit about that. I know your family's big, and I know the things that you left behind in Austin were significant, but not as significant as what you're doing here.
Well, my family means the world to me. I mean, especially my little brothers and sisters, they are, you know, I was driving up here and I spent Saturday night playing Pictionary with them, and they've become my best friends. And, you know, I'm in a part of my PhD program where I was able to not be in the classroom and do research wherever I wanted to do research. And so because I was following my time, I wanted to embrace the opportunity to come back. So I came back regardless of this race to be closer to my siblings. And then this race started to happen, but I did have a career that I was building. I did have a PhD that I've been working on, and it was a sacrifice to run. But I tell young people that I work with, I'm fortunate to be national president for Latina Service Sorority, and so I have about 4,000 Latinas all over the country that I get to work with. And one of the messages I talk to them about is if 18% of Latinos have a college degree, that's a very small portion of our community as a whole. And so therefore we have a responsibility to use our intellectual capital to make a difference, to apply our degrees in a critical way to support our community, to continue to encourage our community to grow and become stronger. Like the way it does every day. And so I think that is one of the main messages that this campaign is symbolic of, is the idea of an intellectual service, an intellectual servitude, right? To combine the classroom knowledge to the practical reality of what's going on.
We're down to the last few minutes. I'd like to ask two questions that I regularly ask my guests. The first one is, you know, if you had some advice to give to other young people that may be interested in one day running for office, what would that advice be?
I would say that actions are really important. If you're interested in running for office, I think your actions now prepare you for the future life you want to live. And so you have to think about, what am I putting on Facebook? What am I putting on Twitter? How am I representing myself right now? Even as early as 15, 16, 17, 18, because this will come back to be part of your legacy. And so what kind of legacy do you want to leave? Do you want to leave a positive legacy where people can say, oh, I remember that person. They were always so helpful. They were always so kind. They were always trying to make a difference. Or a legacy that is kind of spotty. And so I would tell young people, watch your actions now because they will determine your future. And the second thing I would tell them is role models. I am extremely fortunate to have multiple role models, everyone from my parents to my academic advisors and people at UT Austin, and then people now in the political world who have been just great role models. No one gets to where they are by themselves, and they have to say thank you, and they have to really be able to accept some help and some support and some ideas from other spaces.
And you actually led me right into my other question that I regularly ask on the show. In a couple words, maybe 2 or 3, the legacy you'd like to leave behind.
Someone who's a fighter and uses her personal and political self to make a difference for the community.
Mary, I wish you the best of luck on the campaign. You know, I think that you're the type of person that we need more of in our community, and I wish you the very best.
Thank you, Hector.
Folks, when we talk about the future of our community, when we talk about a changing America, it begins with ourselves. It begins in our own neighborhoods. It begins in our own districts. Election season is upon us, and there's a lot of things on the table. Mary Gonzalez is one of 2 candidates currently in the race. It was a lot bigger field, but actually that field has now narrowed to just 2. And a potential third that is in the process, I guess, of filing. And those individuals are Mary Gonzalez, Hector Enriquez, and Tony San Roman. Tony San Roman are the 3 candidates running for House District 75. We will make an effort to bring other people onto our show so that we can have all of you listen to their opinions, but definitely get involved, because this is exactly what we need to talk about in our community. For all of us here at Fronteras, have a good evening. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. I'm Hector H. Lopez.